Q&A. I also need to, so I can see what I'm doing, turn the light up on my phone and all the other things I should have done before I went live. Let's make it to only people can comment if they are subscribers. By the way, it's free to subscribe. Don't yell at me about money. And then I'm going to put it to all messages so I can see everybody's comment. There we go. All right. That is better. I always have my screen brightness way down so I can't see anything, so it doesn't burn my retinas out while I'm looking at my phone. But when I'm doing this, it makes it hard. I'm like, it's so dark in here, but really I'm fine. We're all right. So, let's make some tea today. Today I'm going to make some Nepali silver needle. The day that I finally run out of this will be sad. I can buy more. And I've told this story a million times, but I went to go buy a very much so lower quality, but still nice tea, and I bought it, and it was like, wait, no, they had it on there, and they had it on sale or something, and I bought it, and they were like, oh, that's right, I bought a pound of really nice but like lower end, like not as fancy tea, and then they were out of that and it wasn't supposed to be on their website. So as a way to apologize, they sent me a pound of the silver needle tea, which by the way was like $200 more expensive, and I was like, woo. So I have this for a while now, and I've just been like slowly like using it. But the really cool thing to know about like tea in the way of like Camellia sinensis compared to other herbs is as she ages, she actually gets better, right? More, wrong lid, April. More properties become available. More like phenols and things open up. More antioxidants become present. The flavors change. That's why if you want to buy like an aged like cake of like moonlight purple or just something random that's aged in a cake, it can cost you like hundreds of dollars if it's super old. But hey, everybody, rolling in. So today is the Friday Q&A. Let's get some tea going, and then once I have my first sip of tea, I'll start answering questions. That's the way that goes, I think. So this is a white tea, so I'm gonna crank my teapot here all the way up to 180. White teas, you can go on the higher end of temperature, whereas green teas, you want to go lower. There's less tannins, and I really like white teas. They're the same plant, just picked at a different time. Yay, somebody finally made a live. Hi. Yeah, so, I don't know. I feel like this week's been going okay. I've just been kind of like, I don't know, still existing and still working. Thank you for becoming a member, Maria. Yeah, that's a good way to support me with just a couple bucks a month. There's nothing hidden. You do get early access to videos. I usually say this at the end, but you do get early access to videos as I upload them. But if you can't afford to, don't worry about it. I release them on the weekends. I think this weekend, Sunday, I'm either releasing the turmeric video or the beetroot tincture video. I don't recall which one, but it's coming up. And I've got more videos in the works, and today I'm feeling a little bit better than I have been. I've just been kind of like up and down with like my own like personal health because I have weird genetics, but I take the good days when I can take them. Right? And so I'm feeling pretty good. Feeling pretty good today, just kind of upbeat, and we need those days even when we're still like a long road ahead of us, like just having that time where we don't feel like death. I felt like human garbage yesterday though. So I've been in a lot of like, I've got like hip issues going on, like with my hip, and I make headway and then it like goes back again. Like a year and a half ago, I was like walking down my driveway and I like stepped on a big rock just wrong, like where you normally twist your ankle, I twisted my hip, and it just doesn't, I guess I'm just at that point where my body's like, it's going to take you time to recover, and so I'm always having to go and get my hips adjusted, and I do a lot of hip work and radial therapy and stretching and all that type of stuff, and I've got a very firm mattress, and I even bought, and here is like a pro tip, this has actually been a thing that has helped me a lot, and as a reminder, I start answering questions after my tea is ready. I bought myself a rocking chair, but not like a lazy boy rocking chair, like the type that you would put on your porch, like a hard rocking chair, right? And it's crazy how much that has helped my back. Like, I don't have sciatica anymore, really. I had resolved that a lot before I got the rocking chair, but like, because like sitting is kind of the new smoking, where you're like never moving your body. I always overfill it. Where you're not moving your body often. When you're in a rocking chair, you naturally are doing this. And I don't mean like you're rocking back and forth. I mean like you're pushing with your legs. And so it's like moving all of these muscles and stuff. And it has helped tremendously. I'm going to spill a little bit. And the coolest thing about it is you got to remember, like, you can hop online to like your Facebook marketplace or whatever right now, and if you type in rocking chair, you can probably get one for a song, right? Because people are wanting to get rid of them, or just an old thing sitting around. Of course, buy a quality one that's not going to like fall apart when you sit on it. But it has made a huge difference in my back health. And then I put like I have one of those like sciatica pillows, that like space your hips right, because that helps a lot. And I just put that pillow on the rocking chair, and that's how I do all my computer work now. My back doesn't hurt, my neck doesn't hurt, any of that stuff. And so it's just been a huge help. So if you're suffering from back pain, that may be something to look into, right? um, but yeah, I am feeling pretty good today. I'm just doing online work, is the shame of it. But that's okay. Sometimes I get like burnt out like on my work, just like in regards of like having to keep on top of having everything stocked and like doing all the online work. But sometimes I get an idea to like update the website, or an idea to do something, and it energizes me. It makes me feel excited, which is probably what's happening now. It like triggered my OE. I'm like, oh, I'm not bored anymore. Right? Because it's really easy for me to get bored, but not in like an ADD way or an ADHD way. Like I can like work something to death for like 3 years, and then I'm like, or 5 or 10 years in my case, and then I'm like, I know all of this, so it's boring. And so whenever I like come up with an idea or like discover something new, it excites me. Um, but yeah, do you think that rocking chair thing would help my hips too? It's been helping my hips a lot. Um, in fact, one of the reasons that I ended up getting it was not because of my sciatica, which is again pretty much had resolved before I got the rocking chair, but because of my damn hip, right? And then working on loosening this muscle in your leg goes a long way to loosening your hip, right? And so I use like a TENS machine, and sometimes I lay on like a really rigid ball, which hurts so bad, but it actually stops the pain otherwise, right? Switching to a firmer mattress did help some, not enough that it really matters. No, it did. If you have like way too soft of a mattress, what happens is like your whole body like goes like this, right? It dips down, but then that pressure is on your hip because it's like bent, right? And so switching to a firmer mattress did help a lot. Um, but it's just kind of a combination of things. But going to a chiropractor, and thankfully the chiropractor I go to, and I think most are this way. Like it's only $50 for me to go see her now because I've paid the initial, and I mean, money is tight, obviously, for everybody, but $50 is like, if that can help me not be in chronic pain once every 2 weeks, it's worth it, right? People spend money on dumber shit when they don't have it, right? But we don't like eat fast food or like do a lot of stuff. Like, we don't smoke or really buy coffee drinks, or we don't really do a lot of the stuff that other people do. So it just depends on like your priorities and where you want to spend your money at, right? Um, Ooh, that smells so nice. I haven't had this one for a while. I rotate through a lot, but then I come back and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember you. We're friends. you know. Um, all right, let's see how she tastes. I know what she's gonna taste like, but like it's still exciting every time, right? That's so nice. I choked on it. No, I really like this one. Um, she's like really earthy, almost tastes like hazelnuts or chestnuts, and like has kind of like I imagine what like fall air would taste like, right? Like I can taste the air right now and it tastes like nothing, but you know what I mean? Like it's like woodsy, and I really like it. But yeah, and I slurp because it makes the flavor go all the way across on my tongue before people are like, that's why you choked. It is absolutely why I choked. But it's 100% worth it. Okay, so you guys know the drill. If you have a question, you can say question and then throw a question at me and then I'll answer the best of my ability. Question, what would the first thing you would do for children's sickness, viral or bacterial? Well, those are two different things and it depends on the age of the kid, right? But resting, right, is a big one. Obviously, we know that one, but like what does resting really mean? Like if they're hyper stimulated by like cartoons and stuff, which I know it can be hard because like we want them to like oh, I got my window open, a train's coming, so prepare for that. um we want to keep them like contained and calm, but like maybe finding like something that's less stimulating, something that's really calming versus like hyper and like, because a lot of shows now they're like bright and they want to contain your like attention, right? But that's actually not letting you rest because your brain's constantly going. So like finding something super calming like Little Bear or something like that, that's not as like stimulatory would be helpful. But from an herbal perspective, I really like linden. Linden's both anti-viral and antibacterial, and she's safe for little ones. She's been used for a really long time. She's pretty good at lowering fevers, helping them feel calm, and just kind of general like supporting overall well-being. And so linden's a nice one. If they're really young, you could make like linden popsicles. If you can't get them to drink the linden tea, you could make linden gummies. And you can just make that linden infusion. I have a video about it here on my YouTube, and then you can turn that into like the popsicles or gummies. It's kind of has a floral flavor, so it doesn't really taste bad. And then, contrary to what people will tell you, don't restrict carbohydrates. I'm not saying to feed them like candy, but like give them all the fruit and the juice that they want, like high quality juice, right? Because your body actually needs carbohydrates to like fuel every cell in your body. And like if they're under eating, like if that's the time when parents decide to take back carbohydrates, their little bodies are like, oh my god, we don't have what we need. And so they'll jack up cortisol levels, which innately represses your immune system. So like when you're not eating, whether you're a kid or adult, when you're not eating carbohydrates, what your body does is it releases cortisol so it can start digesting glucose from your muscles, which is why stress makes like muscle mass go way down, right? And so like you kind of have to like always have glucose in your body or you'll go brain dead. So your body's like, okay, well, we're just gonna rob it from everywhere else. So making sure that like you're eating fruit and things like that when you're sick is really important. It's my random bit of information. Question, I got a hair test done and I'm having a hard time figuring out what to do based on the results. My question is, where is the best place to get help figuring out what to do to resolve the issue? Most of the places that you buy an HTMA hair test from, if you go look, they probably have a way to upsell you for a consultation. Right. But other than that, you can start looking at like YouTube videos about understanding hair test results, blog posts. There's all types of stuff that can help you understand it. Usually what you're going to find is you probably have something that's really high and something that's really low and out of balance, right? And most of the time they're going to look at your diet and see what you are eating too much of or not eating enough of, and of course with some things you can supplement if you're like bottom level, but there are definitely ample like free YouTube videos and resources online to learn how to interpret them. But if you feel like you really need guidance, I would look at the place that you bought it from and probably see if they have an upsell, right? And that's just what it is. It's an upsell, right? You'll buy the test and then they're like, okay, well then like if you want, you can pay for us to like interpret it for you. And then you're usually dealing with like a functional medicine doctor or a nutritionalist or somebody in that realm that has experience reading the HTMA test results. Let me jump way down here. Okay. Oh, thank you so much for the super Tammy. I'm sorry if you asked a question and I didn't see it. Question, is there any danger in drinking over fermented milk kefir? I cannot seem to get it to the perfect state. No, it's just a little boozy. It has a little less probiotic count at that point in time because oh, that was a real close shot. Sun must be outside shooting. I hope that was my kid outside shooting. A weird thing that people say when you live in the country. If not, somebody else's too on our property shooting. But what was I saying? I was talking about over fermented with the milk kefir. It gets less probiotic content in it as it over ferments because the bugs run out of food, right? Because it's a bacteria that's living off of like glucose and all that stuff. But if you just probably got to pay attention to, like, if it's over fermenting, I would be like, okay, when do you usually do it? If you're like, oh, I wait till the evening and then it's over fermented, try that next morning. Try before you seeing it separate. Like, kind of pay attention to your times and the temperature of your house and play around with it, because eventually you'll find somewhere where it's not over fermented. But no, it can't hurt you. Question: what can I take for thyroid nodules? Usually when we have thyroid nodules, we're like deeply deficient in iodine. Straight up. I mean, and we're probably loaded down with bromide, right? So I would look into like the iodine protocol. There are groups on Facebook and Reddit that you can look into where people talk about it. And if you don't want to use like derived iodine, you could start working with like nourishing infusions of seaweed, right? Because it'll naturally have iodine in it. But yeah, that is the first place that I would look into. You could even get an iodine test, but I would consider doing an iodine wasting test, where it's like a urine test, where they make you drink a ton of iodine and then you pee, right? And if there's barely any iodine in your urine, you know that you're severely deficient, because it's like they can depict your deficiency by how much is like not pissed out, right? Because iodine is one of those things where when you have enough, your body just releases it and you pee it out. It's like water soluble in that way. Question: being a 71-year-old human, would it be advisable to get a shingle vaccine and a flu shot? That's a loaded question, and not from you, but just in regards of answering it. I would personally never get the flu shot. Just That's just a personal preference, but also like my mom is 72 and she doesn't do the flu shot. Now the shingles, it's up to you. If you've had them before, some people feel comfortable doing it, but I've also read reports and seen people talk about they never had shingles until they got, the shot for it. So, I would just say do some more research. The flu one is just kind of, I don't know. I don't like it. All the potential issues aside of danger, the reason that I don't like it from a different basis is like our bodies live in a rhythm. They're not stupid. Like they know when it's spring, summer, fall. And they know that certain things come around at certain times of the year, right? So what I don't like is when somebody goes and gets a poke for that. Uh, your body's like, I have made it through that season. But usually, especially if you live on the West Coast, that season hasn't even hit yet. So people who get that almost always end up with some version of the flu, right? And it's like, and they're guessing, right? By the time it's made on the East Coast and gets to the West Coast, it's completely something different, and it's a swing in the dark, right? And so I just don't personally like it. I would rather rely on like supporting my immune system and getting enough rest, and getting out into the morning sun even when it's wintertime and things like that. Okay, so I saw this. Thank you so much for the super, Ellie. Um, any advice, tips for mono? It keeps coming back. Yeah, so mono is EBV, Epstein-Barr virus. It's a really weak bacteria, or virus, I should say. And by weak, I mean the only reason that it's showing up is because your immune system is low. It doesn't really have the capacity to like punch through, especially when it's not the first time infection, right? So it waits for something else to weaken your immune system, and it's like, surprise, I'm here too, right? I really like reishi mushroom for dealing with like a low immune system, but it might, take a little bit more than that. You might have to work on your overall immune health. You might have gut health issues. Working with homemade milk kefir would be a great idea to increase your immune function, but also like using that in conjunction with like medicinal mushrooms. Turkey tail mushroom is a good one because she's an immune modulator. So if your immune system's too high, she calms it down. If it's too low, it rises it back up, right? But yeah, almost everybody has the EBV virus. People are like, "What? I do not." Yeah, you do. Even if you never had mono, which is what they call it when you first get it, the kissing disease or whatever, it's actually just the Epstein-Barr virus. And the reason why so many people have it is because, like, for example, like if your great grandmother on your mother's side had it, every baby born after that has it because it's in the blood. right? And so it's like taken over something the last I looked like 90% of the human population, right? But we don't notice it until we get really ran down. Stress brings it up. If you're super stressed out all the time, or if grief happened, or something big happened, or you're chronically doom scrolling, anything like that, remember cortisol represses your immune system. So that could be the thing that's pushing it. But definitely look for the root cause, like why is your immune system low and how can you help support that, right? Question: some people are concerned about estrogen in milk. Is it something to be concerned about? If they were like, first of all, they no longer give hormones to cows, or goats or anything like that, but I don't think so. Like, I drink raw goat's milk constantly, and before that, raw cow milk, and I don't have estrogen dominance. You should be more concerned about the soy they add to everything. That's a phytoestrogen, completely different, right? You should be concerned about that. I would be more worried about like rancid seed oils and like soy lecithin that's added to everything. I mean, everything. It's so crazy. If you start reading labels, you're going to be like, wow, I put a lot less in my cart because everything is full of seed oils and everything is full of soy, right? And I'd be far. And I think they like to use natural foods, real foods, as scapegoats. They're like, oh, you're estrogen dominant because you're drinking milk, and milk is bad, even though humans have been drinking it thousands of years and never dealt with estrogen dominance issues before. Right. But now that there is soy in everything, decide which one you really think is causing it, right? Question: any tips for growing turmeric in pots? Do you grow your own? I don't, but it's probably pretty similar to ginger. I've just never tried to grow turmeric because I don't use it all that much. I use ginger a lot though, and it is really easy to grow in pots. It's probably the same. If I had to guess, it probably doesn't like go down. It probably branches out from the initial like rhizome that you put in the ground. So I would suggest probably potting it like right in the middle, right, and imagine that it's going to spread. I don't know if they go down. Ginger doesn't go down a whole lot. They kind of just go right there at the surface, kind of like flat. I imagine it's pretty similar. I believe they're related. I'd have to look into it, but my brain says they're related, but I could be wrong. So I think that would probably be a good bet. And if you live somewhere where it's not super hot in the summertime, you probably would want to consider a greenhouse, but look into what type of humidity they need too. Question: is there anything my daughter can do for her, I always say it wrong, her HS under her arms? It's like you constant, is that the one where you constantly sweat, or where you get the sores? I think she's talking about where you get the sores. I would stop using any oil based deodorant right away. Absolutely. Oil based deodorant, like oil plus water, equals a bacterial explosion, and the sweat that comes out of you is water. Right, so there's no need to be like, oh, it has to be tap water, right? And so what happens is, as bacteria grows up, you start plugging pores and things like that, and then you're more likely for a sore to build up, right? Find a water-based deodorant. If you are going to use one, you could do castor oil packs when they first start to come on, to try to get it to like open out sooner and heal down faster. You might be able to do castor oil preventively, and I know that's counterintuitive because I told you not to use oil on there, but after you use that oil, I would make sure that you wash it off really well with like soap and water. Right after you do the castor oil pack, wash it off really well. And the difference is, when you put deodorant on, you're leaving it on all day. And you wash your armpits, but it's not like you're washing it to intentionally remove the deodorant and it's on there for hours, right? Whereas if you're using a castor oil pack and right when you're done, you use soap and water to get the oil off, you see what I'm saying? It's not staying there to create the bacterial growth. So that's something I would look into. Question: what are good alternatives to seed oils? You can use coconut oil, you can use olive oil, you can use avocado oil, you can use animal fats like tallow, ghee, duck fat, butter, all that type of stuff. I like lard too. And now, of course, you don't want like the cheapest, like poor factory raised animal stuff. So like go in on some quality. But oh man, if you've never fried a ribeye steak in tallow, like in its own fat, it is like amazing. And I like using ghee as well. If you want like a really like crusty exterior where it's like nice and crunchy, is really good too. But also, everybody in America used to eat animal fats. Even McDonald's used to fry with tallow. And then when everybody switched over to seed oils, Wonder what happened to us as a nation. We're suddenly obese with diseases and we're sick all the time. And it's not because that we're eating too many animal products. It's because we switched to hyper refined, ultra processed seed oils and everything, right? It's so bad. Um, Question about chamomile. Um, let's see. I want to grow chamomile for tinctures and infusions, but there seems to be different species. Should I do Roman chamomile or German chamomile seeds? I like them both. They both work the same. You will find that Roman chamomile tends to seed back, in my experience, and come back on its own the next year a little bit better than German chamomile. But I find that German chamomile has a stronger, like, floral apple taste. But I am also like a chamomile snob. So I'm all about different types, but as far as making a tincture goes, it's potato. Any will work. They all have the same compounds, except for Dyer's chamomile. That's not actually a chamomile. That's something that people use for dye, and I see people get all the time, and I'm like, you can actually ingest that one, right? Question: can you get rid of asthma? It depends on if you were born with it or something caused it, right? So my son, we got a thing going around in 2020, and it wasn't horrible, but then we got slammed with like the summer of like smoke in the Pacific Northwest that year where you literally couldn't see the sun. It was so fucking depressing, and like he definitely went outside way more than he needed to, and he developed asthma. We took him to a specialist. They're like, congratulations, you have asthma, there's nothing you can ever do about it. And I'm like, but he wasn't born with it. Right, this was a kid that was like hiking up hills into the mountains and never having issues to suddenly he can't like walk up the driveway without. And so I started working with tiger's milk mushroom and as well as mullein, obviously. And in about 3 months, maybe less, of him consistently using that, he just doesn't have asthma anymore. Just doesn't have asthma anymore. Just no asthma. And so it just depends on what cause. If you were born with it, those things might be supportive, but I don't know if it would completely like reverse it type of situation. But not born with it. So if you're not born with it, I would definitely give that a try. It's called tiger's milk mushroom. It's more accessible now than it was back when I first started using it for him. So it's out there, and definitely look into it. Question: I made my first tincture. I made my first tincture in September. Queen Anne's lace. I put what I harvested on a cookie sheet, uncovered in the freezer for a few days until I could buy some. Is that yeah, that's totally fine. So what I do throughout the season is like in the spring or midsummer actually, I'll like start harvesting the blooms and freeze them, and then I'll harvest some of the green seed baskets and freeze them, and then when the seeds are dried and ready and brown out there, then I harvest that and I put them all together. Sometimes you can get lucky. Sometimes here I'll have all three ready at the same time, just growing naturally that way. But freezing herbs to make a tincture is perfectly fine. And what's interesting is it actually breaks open the cellular structure, because like think about when you put a pop or a soda, whatever you call it, in the freezer and you forget about it and it goes boom because the water content in the soda expanded past the size of the can, so it fucking explodes, right? Well, same thing happens to plants on the cellular level. So like if you freeze it, what happens is the cellular structure swells up because there's water in it and it breaks. And that's why sometimes you have to prepare vegetables before you freeze them, like in regards to eating and a texture, right? Like you want to blanch them to pre-break those cells and then they freeze better. But when it comes from a tincture standpoint, you don't have to worry about that. It's just going to make the tincture more effective. And I've actually found that when I'm using frozen fresh plant matter to make a tincture, my tincture it feels like it's ready like a week or two earlier sometimes. Not always, but sometimes I notice like just by like experience, and I'm like, you're ready, right? And then lab tests that I've done have confirmed that, right? But it's just because it broke open that cellular structure, which helped the alcohol do its job of extracting that. Question: any advice on chronic vomiting and chronic fatigue syndrome? Well, I'm guessing the chronic vomiting is leading to your chronic fatigue syndrome. Have you been tested for SIBO or SIFO, small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, or small intestinal fungal overgrowth? Right, that's definitely something that you need to get marked off, and find somebody who tests for both, because so often somebody will do a SIBO test and they'll be like, congratulations, you don't have SIBO, but they didn't test for fungal overgrowth, and so no, actually you have SIFO. And they just missed it, and then you walk away thinking that that's not the issue, but it could be. So I would probably work on getting the vomiting figured out, and I know, not that you haven't been, but I would work on getting that figured out, because once you do that, you can start rebuilding the nutrition that you're rapidly losing. Your body is probably demineralizing. You are probably deeply deficient in most things. And just to share, like, my son had non-typical SIBO where he vomited chronically, and it took us a long time to figure out what the hell it was, because SIBO usually goes out the other way, right? You're usually shitting yourself to death. And once we figured out what it was, in about a week and a half, we were able to make it stop. Now, that's not the case for everybody, but if you find that out, or even if you don't, I would look into making L-reuteri yogurt at home. You can buy the probiotic capsules, but it won't be as beneficial as making your own. You could also look into making your own homemade milk kefir. There is a bacteria imbalance in your gut, straight up, right? Like, most of the time. I'm assuming you've been checked for like GERD and other esophagus type issues. That could be a problem too. But if that's not it, like, even if that is it, you could still work with milk kefir and stuff to heal GERD and things like that. Okay, so question: would castor oil work well for things like sprains? Yeah. You can even get inventive and do like comfrey infused castor oil, right? And so you would just infuse that castor oil, then use that to do a castor oil pack. But you could use normal castor oil in the meantime, because it'll take, a month or two to infuse your castor oil with comfrey, right? And by that time, your sprain might be healed up. But some sprains are like kind of like persistent, like a break that just doesn't want to heal, right? Sprains, and then you can be like super prone to constantly spraining your ankle again. Like, that happened to my dad. I'll never forget it. We were hunting, and I was pretty young. I was like 10 or 11, but I'd been hunting for years by that point with him, and he is really good, man. And he can still take like 2, 3, 400, like, serious 400 long yard shots for an animal. Like, he's amazing at that stuff. And he just happened to have his foot on a rock on the wrong way when he took that shot, and it snapped his ankle. Oh man. And it was really bad, because like, it changed his life. Like, that moment changed his life, because he was forever like, as soon as he would heal, he would step just wrong, and it right again, just right again, right again, right again, and it really changed. And I also know, never forget, because me and his friend, lifelong friend, we had to hike up top to get the deer. And this will freak people out. We had to hike up top to get the deer, and we get up there, and Don had forgot his knife. I was like, oh my god. And we're way up there, and this deer, it was slowly dying, but usually when you get there, you might finish it off. And so I just picked up a rock and finished it off at 10 years old. I'll never forget it, and it'll freak people out. But like, you just have to do what you have to do when you're hunting, and it was like, it was fast. It was a big rock. I didn't know what happened, but it was just very like, I was like, all right, Don forgot his knife, and then have to drag it back down the hill, that type of stuff. Is peppermint oil in candy the same as peppermint essential oil? Usually no. It used to not be. The answer used to be no. But now, yes. 90% of the industry using oil, peppermint oil, is using essential oil, because they have taken over the industry, right? And, you gotta remember that they are making billions of gallons of essential oil a year, and they're not all being bought up in the tiny little droppers. They are being bought by, like, you can go right now if you want and buy a 50-gallon barrel of limonene or camphor or this or this or that, and you can call it spearmint, peppermint oil, this, that. And so people are buying that and using it as a food ingredient, and they like that because it's not regulated by the FDA, because it's considered a cosmetic. So they're using it off-label. So they don't actually tell you, they don't have any regulations to actually tell you what it is. They can just say peppermint oil, peppermint extract, peppermint flavoring. They can just say natural flavoring, but oftentimes these days it's essential oils, unfortunately. I watched my mom destroy her gut health. So she had an upset stomach one day, and she bought some Andes mints a long time ago. I was a kid. I now know what happened to her. She bought some Andes mints, and of course, it helped, right? At first, it helped. And then it was like, Andes mints, Andes, and I'm talking about not the candies, not the little bars, but the little, the Andes, Altoids, that's what it is, Altoids. She was using Altoids all the time, and it was like another Altoid. There was a point where she was probably going through a pack of Altoids a day, and her gut health is just annihilated, because she's been ingesting, essential oils for 20 years or more. And she's come a long way. She doesn't use those anymore. She's come a long way in healing her gut, but it was definitely why her gut got destroyed, right? Because she's just eating through her stomach lining and killing all of her beneficial bacteria and repressing your T cells and just all types of horrible stuff. Question: would castor oil help with skin related things? Husband has a thick skin buildup on his foot that cracks and hurts and says it's eczema. I think it's psoriasis and it never goes away. Well, it could, but getting to a dermatologist to see what it is would go a long way because how you treat those things are differently. And when we have a really bad rash, especially on our feet or anywhere like that that pops up like that, it can be an indicator of other things like liver health or diabetes complications. So definitely go get it checked out because it could be problematic. But of course, you can use castor oil. You could also use tallow topically. It depends on if it's itchy, if it's flaky, if it's dry, right? But if you haven't had it seen yet, go get it seen so you're not swinging in the dark and you know what it is and make sure that there aren't other complications going along with it. Question: what is good for a carrier oil to put in mullein flour for ear infections when you don't have jojoba? I would never use jojoba. That stuff is too sticky in regards for being in the ear. I really like, I would either use like the liquefied, like the refined coconut oil and or avocado oil. Both of those dry down really fast and don't lend themselves to making buildup in your ear, right? Something like jojoba that's really thick and has a pretty good wax percentage kind of left in it can like end up blocking your ear more than helping. So I just got Altoids a week ago and have been throwing up at night. Thanks for the random information. I'll throw the mints away. Yeah. If that's where you just started using them and you've been throwing up at night, that is like literally cause and correlation to see if it stops, right? Yeah, they can be really damaging. I'm allergic to penicillin and had to use garlic drops. Work great. That's fantastic. Also, it sucks so bad to be allergic to penicillin. I'm sorry. It is such a fantastic antibiotic, and everything in the penicillin class of antibiotics is like they are like the antibiotics that I trust, right? Like, so if everyone's like, "Hey, would you ever use antibiotics?" I'm like, "Yeah, pretty much anything in the penicillin line is what I would use." I don't know. Doxycycline, is that, if that's not, I don't think that's in the penicillin line. Come on, brain. But if you had to pick an antibiotic that wasn't in the penicillin line, and I could be 100% wrong, I would go with doxycycline. I think doxycycline is pretty neat. It's actually like more closely related to a high dose of vitamin K in the way that it represses bacterial growth versus like kills bacteria, and that's a big difference. It might not sound like a big difference, but it really is for gut health and physical health and things like that. The only drawback is it can make you sensitive to the sun for some people. Let's see. Hello, thank you for answering questions. I have not been well for a long time and recently discovered I was exposed to mold in my apartment for 12 years. What do you think is the best protocol? So, of course, you can find tons of stuff online about getting mold out of your body using binders, saunas, sweating is the best way, and that is all great advice. But they always miss something and it drives me up the wall. There are things being depleted from your body and that have been depleted from your body because of the mold exposure. So yes, you need to get like the mycotoxins and stuff out of your body. But what you don't realize is that B12 as well as vitamin C and vitamin A, sometimes vitamin E, these vitamins, they have an affinity to binding to toxins and things in your body to protect you. So like B12, for example, like if you somehow got fed cyanide, which I hope that never happens and they know what it is, and they take you to the hospital, they would give you massive doses, like a whole IV bag of B12, because what happens is the B12 literally binds to the cyanide and then you just piss it out and you're fine. Right? Well, the same thing happens when you're exposed to mold as well. And the same thing can happen with vitamin C. So basically, while these vitamins have big roles in our body beyond removing toxins, the one thing your body does is it's always throwing these vitamins at this toxin so you can piss it out. But because they're water soluble and because the American diet is poor and our soil is shit and all that stuff, what happens is you are not taking in enough of these vitamins through diet to be able to replace what you're pissing out bound to things, right? So most people are living in a chronic state of like subclinical scurvy, right? So not enough vitamin C. Most people are living in a subclinical state of vitamin B12 deficiency, especially as they're being made to be terrified terrified of eating red meat or meat in general, because the only bioavailable meat, and I don't want to hear it, the only bioavailable meat or version of B12 is in meat. Straight up. And you have digestive issues, it'll be hard to uptake that. But like by the time you're deficient in B12, you honestly need shots, and the pills don't digest well, right? You only get like a tiny amount of the percentage that you're ingesting, right? And if you have the intrinsic factor, which is like an autoimmune thing that prevents you from uptaking B12, like it's crazy. Like I'm a person who eats red meat every single day, and I still have issues with B12 deficiencies because of genetics, right? But the same thing can happen for vitamin A, the same thing can happen for vitamin E and K, a lot of these fat soluble vitamins. And then just to put your head on a spin, most people also don't eat enough fiber or like well prepared beans or oatmeal and things like that. So what happens is there's nothing binding to your bile, which is how you're digesting like the fat soluble like vitamins and things. And so you eat and everything works its way down, and then in theory, you know, you take a shit eventually. But what happens before that is the bile is like grabbed up by your lower intestine, and it's given back to your liver and your gallbladder, and then it goes back into your gut. So you're constantly recycling this toxic bile if you are not eating enough fiber. Right. And so you end up with this mold or heavy metals or too high of something in your body going through again and again and again. So really definitely look into like doing things to like chelate it out of your body. But anybody who's dealing with mold exposure or recovering from mold, I want you to know that a lot of these people miss the mark because they're not looking at what the mold is depleting from your body. And you'll never get the mold out of your body if you don't have the excessive amounts of nutrients that you need to be able to bind to it and get it out. Right. So that was a long one, but just, you know, it's important. Question. Do you use shaggy mane mushrooms? To eat them. They're tasty. They grow around here. We have a large logging industry here because we're in Northeast Oregon, and so there's like lots of lumber mills and stuff. Um, And so there's like huge piles of wood chips, and like there's big piles of wood chips from places that don't exist anymore, and it's just like literally a wood chip. There's no like chemical or anything added, and the shaggy manes love that stuff. But yeah, they're tasty. I haven't really honestly deep dived into the medicinal properties of them, but I'm sure they're there. But they don't store very well, as I'm sure you know. They turn into like a gross black goo really fast. So it's one of those things that you can't really come across in grocery stores, and they're kind of like morel mushrooms where they're kind of hard to grow in captivity. So it's like one of those things where you have to kind of wildcraft it or you can't get it. Question. What's your opinion on consuming apricot kernels? Is there a difference between fresh and dried regards to safety? I've talked about this a little bit before, and I know it's really counterintuitive, but like a lot of people are like, oh, we use them for cancer because it like poisons your body and it makes your body pay attention to what's happening. But like honestly, there are better ways. Like if I was trying to avoid cancer, I would work with turkey tail mushroom every day of the week besides eating like glycosides. So glycosides are a precursor to cyanide, so that might be one way you end up accidentally cyanide poisoning yourself. Because apricot kernels and all stone fruit have glycosides inside of them, right? What happens is it can actually build up in your liver. So if you're eating it like consistently enough, and you know, some people will overdo it, right? What can happen is eventually enough builds up in your liver that it converts to actual cyanide. Right. And that's a very big, like, using poison to cure mindset. It's very homeopathic. And I know that might sound weird because people are like, homeopathic and herbalism are the same thing. They are not. They really are not. And I would suggest, and I won't go too deep into it, but, like, dive into the deep, dark history of homeopathy. And you'll be like, damn, maybe I shouldn't be taking microscopic doses of very poisonous things, right? But I would work with turkey tail mushroom all day long for cancer before I started ingesting stone fruit seeds. Question about acne, young adult, female. What can I use as opposed to Accutane or birth control? I tried zinc supplements with vitamin A and still have. As well as diet changes. So, the first thing to know is that vitamin A and beta-carotene are two different things. And most of the time when somebody buys a vitamin A supplement, it's actually beta-carotene, where your liver might be able to change some of that into retinol. And now when I say retinol, I don't mean the retinol that you buy or get prescribed. I mean retinol from animal fats, which is true vitamin A. But get your levels tested, because it's a fat-soluble vitamin, meaning it can build up in your body and it can become toxic. Ironically, not enough vitamin A, and I mean retinol, not beta-carotene, can cause acne, but also too much vitamin A can cause acne. And as far as diet changes goes, of course, I don't know what those diet changes are, but if they haven't included getting all rancid seed oils out of your diet, then that's the change that needs to be made. Look into like rancid PUFA oils, like low seed oil eating. You might be able to look into the Weston Price Foundation, or like the concept of like Dr. Raymond Pete with pro-metabolic eating, or you could even look into like animal based, and I don't mean carnivore. That's different than carnivore. But all these diets would intuitively remove those seed oils from your life, right? Because there also might be something going on with your liver. You might be estrogen dominant, and also all those diets kind of help with that. And I like them because it doesn't mean you're diet or you're starving. You're just looking at like different types of food and how you're preparing it versus like ultra processed stuff, right? And that can go a long way. And also check out my skin health video that I made about my skincare. People are like, "What do you do to your skin?" I'm like, "I don't do shit." And I know that sounds crazy, but I go into it like in depth in the way that like people like try really hard to like make their skin clear by like constantly like stripping it and robbing it and like putting cleaners on it and doing this and this and that. And ironically, like that's the issue. Like I will never remember or never forget when I was a kid, my grandma was like, my sister begged for these like acne wipe things, you know, those old school, the Neutrogena ones that came out in the beginning, right? And my grandma looked at me and she goes, "If you don't want bad skin, don't do what she does." And I never did. But then I ended up homeless, like from the age of like 13 all the way until about 19ish, right? Man, 20 and 19, just it was in between, right? But what happened was is I didn't have access to showers on a consistent basis, and when I did have a shower, I didn't give a fuck about washing my face. Like I maybe ran water over it, but like I wasn't like in this big thing. And I have flawless skin. I have flawless skin because I allowed my skin to exist naturally, and it's able to balance itself out, and I wasn't using all these cleaners and no chlorinated water really. I mean, I guess I did back then, but again, it was so few and far between. But definitely go check out my skincare video, because there's a lot you can learn there, where I just talk about like what's happening like to your skin and on your skin. And you might be surprised that like doing diet changes but also like doing less to your skin might be really helpful. So question, this is the last one, I'm going to jump off, guys. My friend has been on... Oh, that's a fucking rough question. My friend has been Klonopin for a while now. I cannot sleep without it. She also has other health issues because of it. So, to put this into... And I didn't know the question before I read it. So, to put this in perspective, a very long time ago, I went to a psychologist because I had my very first waking night terror. If you don't know what a waking night terror is, it's where you wake up and the night terror is still going on. It's like sleepwalking plus a horror movie, right? And so I went there, and she should have talked me through the fact that I had PTSD and like figured out all this stuff, and instead she was like, "You need to take these pills so you know what normal feels like again." Well, it took me about 3 months before I took them, and then I took them, and long story short, I was on Klonopin, which, by the way, is like the highest dose of benzo you can take. Even if you're on the lowest dose of Klonopin, it's like taking 5 or 6 Xanax. It's like way up there, right? And so it's definitely different. And I was on it for a decade to feel better. Right, but what it really did is just make me not feel emotions and numb and take away my fear, but that's not a good thing, right? It didn't deal with any of my trauma or anything like that. And then it took me 2 years. 2 years of very safe, not safe, but very slow and very horrendous, safe liquid titration. That means like it took me 2 years of very, very slowly lowering the dose to come off of the Klonopin safely. Benzos are the most dangerous drug there is. All right, I know that people are like, "Oh, but heroin and fentanyl and things like that," and I understand that, but like, you can't just go through withdrawal. you can't just go through withdrawal and then like fight the addiction. It's really weird because it's like there's not really like necessarily a mental addiction to Klonopin or benzos. There is a physical addiction. You can actually die. You can die of adult SIDS. The capacity to unalive yourself when coming off of that is massive. Like statistically, it's like 50% of people. Like you have to have a plan. And so it took me 2 years of hell. It is probably the hardest thing I have ever gone through in my life. My daughter and my husband, they're mods here right now. They can tell you, like, how bad that was. I can't even list all the symptoms. There are thousands of symptoms that come from getting off of it because your GABA receptors in your brain are going insane. So, depending on how long she's been on it, it might take her a very long time to come off of it, and she needs to be willing to do so, and she needs to be prepared to do so. She has to do the research and look at her support system and see what can happen there, and she has to be willing to face a lot of her own shit, right? And like really look into that stuff. And it is just really, really hard. Now, there is one thing that I wish I would have known in the beginning, but also I guess I needed to go through it, so I don't know if like a quick fix would have been helpful. But there's this lady on YouTube, I don't know if she's still here. I believe she is. At least she has a website where she calls herself Amanita Dreamer. She shares her experience about coming off of benzos and how she was literally walking into the woods to unalive herself when she came across an Amanita mushroom, and it basically called out to her. And I know that sounds super spiritual, but as a person who lives in the land, like I've had plants show up to me like that, right? And then maybe not in that exact situation, but I know what she was talking about, right? And it turns out one thing that Amanita mushroom does is like changes and fixes your GABA receptors, right? And so she decided, well, I was gonna die anyway, so I guess I'll just fucking trip balls on Amanita mushroom, which by the way is completely illegal in the United States except for Tennessee. In Tennessee, you can only have them decoratively. You cannot ingest them. And you have to do special stuff. It's not just like a normal mushroom. You have to do it special and well, right? But it completely saved her life. It took away all of her symptoms. And I don't know if that would do that for everybody. And it's not something to walk into lightly and just be like, oh, I ordered this random shit and now I'm going to eat it and I'm better, right? Like, and I don't know that I would, if I, for me on a personal perspective, I don't know if I would go back and change anything. I know that's hard. That's hard to say, and it's probably even hard for my daughter to hear because those were 2 fucking horrendous years. Like, any trauma they got from me, like, inflicted by me as a parent, was when I was coming off of benzos. Because benzo rage is real, because, like, benzo inability to be a parent or notice anything is real. Like, I was dying. I died so many times to myself coming off of benzos. It was brutal. But I also don't know that I would change anything because I wouldn't be here today. And I know that's such a fucking cliche, and people say that stuff all the time, but it's very real. It is a very real feeling. It is a very real thing, but not everybody has the need to go through like a big bad fucking spiritual awakening, and I don't know, and a lot of people don't make it through it. You know, I'm very, very grateful, you know. And I think part of my neurodiversity was why I survived it so well. So, like, I don't know. I have a lot of, like, survivor's guilt over it on top of everything else. You know, and so it's just, I don't know. But if I would have come across Amanita Dreamer's work in the beginning, I don't know. Maybe it would have made things a little less brutal. But, yeah, I wish people would talk about it more. Did you know that, like, it's something fucking crazy. The last time they did a poll on it to see how many people were even prescribed it, it was something like, and this was like years ago in like 2012, I believe, or 2013, it was something like 65 or 70% of Americans, particularly females, had been prescribed a benzo. And that is just from 2013-ish. And that is just the people that are getting a prescription versus just taking them from their friends. What do you think happened in 2020? Everybody's on them, right? And you talk about this stuff, people get defensive about it because they think it makes them feel better because they don't have to face anything, but it makes you numb. One of the scariest things that I faced when I was coming off of it was having to feel emotions again. I'm not fucking kidding. It was like, you know how when you're a baby and you don't remember any of this, but like, I don't know if you know this, but like when babies see things, it's like an acid trip for them because they're like, what the fuck? What is that? What is this? Like they're learning all this stuff, right? They go through that with emotions too, as children we do. And as an adult, I went through that. And I'll never forget, me and my husband, you remember that, hon? We were hiking down that, he's moderating, we were hiking down that insanely steep hill. The only trail there was a trail that deer had made from going down it, and we had hiked way up, and we're like, fuck it, if we go down here, we'll drop to the parking lot of where we parked, and then we'll be to the truck. And it was, I mean, it was nervous. It was a nervous thing that an average person would feel, but I had no fear about it. I was like, fuck it, let's go down this very dangerous hill. And I was about halfway down this hill. There was no turning back. And for the first time in a decade, I felt fear. I mean, I felt fucking fear. It was like, holy shit, you are like in a very dangerous, precarious situation right now. You're in fucking snow boots, and like the ground is like slippy, and it's like if you fall, you're not gonna be like, oh, I fell. You're gonna be like, I'm falling, I'm falling, I'm falling, I'm falling all the way to the bottom of the river. And it was like I didn't let it paralyze me, but like by the time I got to the bottom, I was like deep breathing, and it wasn't an anxiety attack. It was not an anxiety attack. It wasn't a panic attack. It was just having to feel a justifiable, like I freaked out over the justifiable feeling of fear. And it was like, it was just, it was fucking crazy. And then like, it was also like that for like, feeling happiness, or like, sometimes happiness would give me a panic attack. Right, because I'm like, what the fuck is this? Right, like, and it was scary. It was scary for my nervous system because I had numbed it so long, you know. But yeah, it is just I don't know, it's brutal. And if you guys want to like see what that looked like real time, at least for what I shared, you can check out my Instagram. And you can go way, way back to like the old posts where like I literally came onto Instagram while I started getting off of benzos. And so it was brutal. It was brutal, you know. I was just ripping apart myself, ripping apart like the world around me, everybody around me. It was not safe to be around me in that point in time. But not necessarily in a bad way, just like if you were doing some shit that was fucked up and wrong, there was no filter of me telling you about it, you know. But that also like included myself, so there's plenty of like rip myself apart posts, rip my relationship apart, rip everything apart. But yeah, so anyhow, if you would like to support my capacity to just dump my brain out and exist here as a human, keep a roof over my head, tea in my pot, all that type of stuff, consider becoming a member. It is a way just to throw me a couple bucks a month to support said existence. There's nothing hidden behind a paywall. You do get early access to videos as I'm able to upload them. If you can do that, or if you want to do support in a different way, you can check out my apothecary. I've got all of my books, synergism capsules, mouth mud. There's something for everybody there. You can use the one-time code TEATIME, TEATIME, to save 10% off of anything you like to come home or call home from the shop. And it does support my direct existence. That's what we do for a living. There's nothing else. Right? If you can't do that, or even if you can, make sure that you like, comment, subscribe, turn on notifications, and share. Sharing is super important because it helps other people realize that they're smart enough to do this too. It helps people realize that they can get curious and take their health back into their own hands. It helps get my work out there. It goes a very long way. So thank you so much for your support and being here with me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.